Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. When I entered the realm of psychedelic medicines, no medicine was more popular and talked about more than that of ayahuasca. I had been fascinated with this medicine for years and hearing so many stories and featuring so many people on the show that have experiences with it. And being as how I personally have yet to experience this medicine myself, you could say that my curiosity has been piqued for quite some time on it. Today's guest on the show is a man whose life has not only benefited greatly from experiencing this medicine, but has also allowed this medicine to open up deeper levels of purpose in his calling to create a center that could allow more people to experience what he experienced in sitting with this medicine. Fast forward to the day, and he has taken action on that goal in creating Lawayra, which is an ayahuasca center located in Colombia, where they practice both traditional ayahuasca ceremonies and the Colombian indigenous way of brewing this medicine, often referred to as Yage. And in this episode, we dive into his journey, what he's learned in running an ayahuasca center, the differences between ayahuasca and Yage, and much, much more. So please, help me in welcoming my man, Sam Believ, to the show. Sam Believ, my man. Dude, I am so excited to have you here. You know, it was amazing. I got the opportunity to go on your show a couple of weeks ago before I went to Austin. And we were so excited to film this episode, man, and get your magic out into the world. Everything you're doing at Lawayra, you know, the biggest ayahuasca retreat center in Colombia. You know, I have a lot of people that reach out to me and they're curious about, you know, the difference between ayahuasca and Yage and these kind of terminologies. And so I was really excited to get you on, man, to dive into all these topics and more. But before we dive into all that juicy stuff, I want to first ask, man, how did you first get connected with psychedelic medicines? You know, was this something that you were always excited about in your life, or did this come later on, man? Because again, you know, someone may look at you, right? Someone running the ayahuasca center and assume that you've always been into this stuff, right? But I know we've talked a little bit beforehand about some of your upbringing. And I'd love to share that with the guests of how someone ends up in the position you're in running the largest ayahuasca retreat center in Colombia, man. Tell me everything.
Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, this is a pretty crazy story because I would say it's a pure synchronicity on top of another synchronicity on top of the other synchronicity. Because originally I come from Latvia. It's one of the least religious countries in the world. I am an engineer by trade, one of the least spiritual professions ever. I never was spiritual. I never was religious. So for me to go from that to running an ayahuasca retreat, there was this big paradigm shift that happened about 4 years ago. So what happened to me was I ended up living in Colombia, and then I felt this. So everyone would tell me about ayahuasca, and a friend of mine told me about it, and I was like, I would never do that. I never do drugs. You know, back then I would still consider it as a drug. I never, because in my culture, it's like if you do any drugs, it's like you end up under the bridge. That's it. Period. Your life is ruined. So I would never touch anything. And then another person would tell me, and then I would listen to the podcast, and then I would read a book, and it just kept calling me. You know, people describe that calling to me. Now, when people come to the retreat, they describe it. I understand it really well. Funny enough, roles have changed. Now, sometimes I'm the messenger for that calling. But basically, it was calling me, and I found myself in a position where, as I like to call it, it was a mix of curiosity and quiet desperation. So the curiosity part was, what is this medicine? Why is everyone talking about it? I really want to try it. And then the quiet desperation was like, something's really not okay with me. Why am I less happy than other people? And then that brought me to the ceremony, and it was extremely profound and extremely beautiful and extremely life-changing. But in the beginning, I didn't really understand how life-changing it was. Still, my life started changing. So it basically shifted the direction which I was going by like 1 degree. But now, 4 years later, it's hard to imagine because 8 years ago, I didn't know where Colombia was on the map. I didn't know what ayahuasca was. I didn't even know probably what psychedelics meant. I knew nothing about spirituality, and look at me now. I even run a podcast about ayahuasca. It's so unpredictable, so you never know. And I see those stories over and over again from people that come to my retreat. They all of a sudden this awakening kind of hits you, and a lot of times plant medicines is the gate, because it just opens up this new realm of possibilities, and your thinking starts changing. But what I can tell you is I am happier, healthier than I ever was before, because thanks to those medicines. Because I used to, basically, I was working in offshore oil and gas. I was making a lot of money. I would make more money in a day than an average Latvian made in a month. So I was like, I figured life out. I had a girlfriend and a car, and your vacations. But I was like dead inside. I couldn't feel much. My emotional landscape was like flatline. Like I wouldn't feel positive energies. I would feel mostly negative stuff. So it's like a flat line down on the spectrum. But it was not a good living. And then from starting to traveling first and then finding psychedelics, now I can feel ups and I can feel downs. I'm more connected with my emotions. I'm still working on myself, because obviously as an Eastern European, we're pretty emotionless, you can say. But I mean, external expression is another thing, but internally, I feel a lot. And yeah, life is good. So ayahuasca changed my life. What can I say?
Dude, I love that story, man, because, there were so many beautiful elements in there with regards to the hero's journey, right? This idea of, at first you refuse the call, right? People are sharing with you about ayahuasca and you're like, nah, man, I don't need that, right? I got my money. I got the job. I got the car. I got the girl. I'm all fine, right? My external reality is abundant. But then, like many people, we find that, yeah, there's something missing, right? We have all these things that we were told would make us happy at the end of the line, but now we're still struggling, right? We don't know really what's going on. And this is exactly where I found psychedelics as well. My intro was not ayahuasca, it was mushrooms. But, again, like, I think a lot of the time when you don't know what you don't know, which is really all the time, paradoxically, right? But when you really are at the end of your rope, you can't figure out something that will help you, and you can't seem to solve the problem that you're going through from the level of thinking that created it. It begs some type of perspective shift. And, for me personally, I really feel these medicines are put here on earth for these exact purposes, right? That, creator would understand, God, however you want to call it, it would understand that at certain points we would get confused, right? As human beings, right? Maybe we get programmed, we have certain belief systems, lineage trauma, things like that. And we start forgetting who and what we truly are. And a lot of the times, right, what do most human beings think needs to happen when we get into a space like that? Oh, we must need to do more things, right? Add more things into the metaphorical traffic jam we already have in our mind. And what I find that all of these medicines do in their own unique way is allow us to actually subtract everything from ourselves to return back to our innate state of being, right? Which is the capital S self, not the lowercase self, aka spirit or soul, not ego. And so it's amazing to hear this journey, man, because when we answer that call that is calling us, whether it's to connect with ayahuasca, whether it's to open a car dealership, whatever it is, right? When that call is heard within us and we answer that, great things will happen. And you just articulated that, right? Like your life is completely 180 degrees different than it was when you were living in your home country, doing the normal, mainstream type of way of living life, so it's really cool to be able to hear this, because what I want all the listeners to understand is that for many of us, myself included, Sam as well, we go through this period, right? If we feel the call, but we're not really sure yet, right? So we may refuse the call for a little while. And then at a certain point, the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change, right? And at that point, change can happen. And so it's really cool that you were able to articulate that, man. It's super rad.
Psychedelics, for me specifically, I started with ayahuasca, but then I also work with mushrooms. So I think those are all really beautiful medicines. And psychedelics, I can't imagine what else can make such a big and quick and swift change, or make this kind of opening. I'm a big fan of meditation and yoga, we actually provided to people at the retreat here. And I always tell them, like, keep doing it when you go back home. But like, I can't see, for example, myself, that I would have had this transition just by making myself meditate for a few years at a time. I mean, you would try and then it would be difficult. So it's just this big explosion. Like the analogy I like to use with like inner work, psychedelics is like a dynamite. And so let's say your subconscious and your mind is like this big mountain, and you're kind of mining, and you're building this tunnel to get to your trauma, whatever. Psychedelics is like a dynamite. You explode it, and then you use therapy, meditation, yoga. There's many ways of doing it. Integration to clear the rubble out, and then you make another explosion, and you keep going deeper. That's like super productive. So in that analogy, if you just use therapy and you just have this old little pickaxe and couple shovels, it's just very slow. If you just use psychedelics all the time and you don't integrate, it's kind of like explosion after explosion. It's just dust. Also, no progress, too much chaos. So I think that there's this magical mix of, let's say, my theory now would be maybe like one ayahuasca retreat a year, couple mushroom ceremonies, maybe lots of integration, like therapy with integration coach, being in the nature, yoga, daily meditation, maybe even some conscious use of cannabis, like what you teach, and there's this perfect recipe of this perfect healing modality, but everyone has to design their own for themselves. But just psychedelics all the time, or like somebody comes and just keeps doing ayahuasca, that's not the way to go. But like, there's no better way to open the door than like this big dose of a strong plant medicine in a very traditional, protected, professional, safe setting. That's what I believe these days.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Yeah, 100%, man. I could not agree more. I see a lot of people that are obviously struggling. They're in some sort of, inner turmoil, and they're going to ceremonies every weekend, right? And, again, as someone who got into psychedelics in my early 20s and definitely fucked around and found out quite often, I understand that. I have compassion for it. But what I've learned as a result of going through that period is that psychedelics, like you were saying, they are dynamite, and they also disintegrate you, which is the point, right? Like, if you're integrated into a malware or virus program, you want to get disintegrated from that. But it does beg reintegrating after. And so what I always tell everyone is, hit the button for psychedelics, right? But make sure you're doing the other end of the bargain, which is integrating. Because for me, right, whenever I would hear about integration, it would sound like homework to me, right? Oh, I have to integrate and things like that, until I realized, no, actually, integration is actually where things really get even more fun, because what happens during integration is that you can stabilize the magic you've experienced in that experience, right? And in doing that, your life becomes the psychedelic. And so you can be naturally high 24/7, and that's what integration does. And it's very similar to how when I got into business, right? I was classically not a structure type person, right? I thought structure was boring, systems were boring, until I realized that what was really boring was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to figure out what I had to do every day because I didn't have a structure in a system or a series of systems. And so when I actually integrated those things, I realized, oh my God, paradoxically, actually systems and structure are the hottest and sexiest thing ever, because now I just open my calendar. It tells me exactly what to do. I do it. I don't have to think about it. I know everything is getting hit every day. And so it's very similar with integration, I felt. These two things in my life have really been complete eye-opening experiences when I dove into them. So I'm really glad you're speaking about that because, it's one of the main things that I think none of us ever got the user manual for any of these plants, right? Any of these medicines. And so a lot of us are doing our best. We come from great intention, but we just don't really know what we're messing with yet. And so, I think it's great that you're out there educating people around, especially ayahuasca, probably one of the most popular plant medicines in existence right now, and showing people like, hey, yes, you can hit these buttons. And yes, they're meant to be hit. But also, there are these other things that can really support you. And very similar to, like you said, it's like Terrence McKenna said, he's like, you can sweep the monastery floor. You can sweep the monastery floor for 7 years if you want, or you can take one hit of LSD, and sub in LSD for ayahuasca or mushrooms or any of these medicines. At the end of the day, for me personally, and I don't project this on everyone, right? Because it's not everyone's path. But for me personally, I like efficiency. And what I found is that yeah, maybe sometimes in a psychedelic experience, a lot can come up, right? A lot of challenge. But I know that it's going to allow me to use a jetpack to get from here to California instead of walking, right? In an analogy type form. And so for me, right, time is the most valuable resource. And so I'm always going to do what takes less time. Because if I can get to a desired location or goal in a quicker and more efficient manner, I'm going to do that. And as long as you're practicing conscious intention with these medicines, oh my goodness, they're one of the best vehicles for rapid growth. It's really cool.
I think that, that's jetpack is also a good analogy, dynamite, whatever. It's just, something that increases the efficiency. What I like about ayahuasca, for example, there's a natural process of where you first get into psychedelics. You get so fascinated that you kind of see them as this thing that can fix everything. It's, a bit of the, there's a fancy word of saying it, but basically, if what you have is a hammer, you see everything as a nail, and then you're like, well, this ayahuasca, it's this
Yeah.
exciting thing, and it can fix all your trauma, and then you just want to drink ayahuasca all the time, and that's okay. Everyone, I think, should go through that phase, and I think it's also okay to allow it to happen because you're getting to know something new, and then eventually, as you mature, you start to understand, okay, ayahuasca is this, and integration is this, and you start to form your own toolbox, which then you can use for certain issues. For example, for me now, I drink ayahuasca once a month. Obviously, I live at an ayahuasca retreat, and it's easy for me, and it's a very sustainable amount because it's just one ceremony a month. But if let's say my wife after pregnancy, she is a little depressed, I'm not going to be like ayahuasca. I would be like, what about a microdose of mushroom, or let's get her a therapist, or those two things together. And it's like you have your own toolbox, which helps you create your own personal healing. And what I like about ayahuasca is if you go too hard and in like overdoing it, it is self-regulating in a way that it happened to me once in my beginning. It's I was going at it too fast. Like every weekend, I would go and find some ceremony or a retreat and just sit there and try to like fix myself. And one time was like, "Why are you back so soon?" It, like literally told me like, "I gave you homework, you didn't do it," and gave me a terrible trip. It's like, "What are you gonna disrespect me? I'm gonna show you," and just slam me. So it's that's the beauty of those ancient, very spirit-centered medicines, that they have their own guidance. So it's really hard to abuse them. I would almost say it's impossible to abuse them. I don't know if when you last saw like a drug addict under the bridge with a bottle of ayahuasca.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen, man, and I like that idea or that theory because I agree with it. It does have like a self-regulating mechanism. That happened to me with mushrooms one time, where I had been hitting the button quite often in my early 20s and just had no idea what I was messing with. I had taken a gram, then 2 grams, then an eighth. We decided to do a 18-gram tea with me and 2 of my friends. And we didn't understand about different strains of mushrooms yet. I've told the story a million times on the show, so I won't go into it completely. But we ended up doing an 18-gram tea of penis envy, when it hit, right? Because we'd lemon teched it as well. So like I had no idea this was our first tea ever. I didn't even think it was going to work, right? Which was really funny. I was like, it's my first time making it. Who knows if it's going to work? And I remember, as soon as it hit me, we were watching a show and I was laughing, right? And then all of a sudden it triggered this visceral response in my being that I had eaten the wrong mold, that my throat was closing up, I was having an allergic reaction, and I was going to die. And so I went through that phase for about, it felt like years, but it was really like 10 minutes that I excused myself and went to the bathroom, tried to make myself puke, couldn't puke, thought I was going to die. And then about 5 to 7 minutes into me, having a very challenging experience, I realized, wait a minute, my throat is not closing up. And when that happened, the cosmic laughter that these mushrooms were laughing at me with was hysterical. And their words exactly were, we had to check you before you wrecked yourself. Now you can go lay in your bed and see some cool visuals, man. And it was like, they were not making fun of me. They were making fun with me. And after that, I gained a lot of respect. And in that experience, it was the deepest I had ever gone, out of body type experiences. And after that was when I really started practicing intention and saying no much more often to psychedelic experiences than when I said yes. And then I remember the next time after that, they gave me a lot to work with because I had gone into them intentionally. I wasn't watching shows anymore. I was listening to frequency healing with a blindfold on. And they were like, okay, like now you've shown that you've grown from being an infant, right? And we can share a little bit more with you. And so they shared quite a bit with me about things that I was looking to make changes in my life about. And over the next year, I implemented those changes and then went back into the mushroom world again. And they were like, congrats, you're really getting this now, right? And it's like been this hilarious back and forth with them ever since where, now when I make a tea, I'm speaking directly into the tea and I'm like, please be gentle with me. I understand what you're going to tell me, or at least I'm open to what you're going to tell me. I don't need a heavy hand. I can really hear these things and implement them. I respect you. Thank you for taking care of me on this journey, And ever since I started doing that, I have beautiful experiences with psilocybin and other psychedelics as well. Albeit sometimes challenges pop up, but because I'm working with them, I'm not just taking them and expecting them to fix everything. The way in which they show me the challenge is very light, And so I can move through that, cry, scream, whatever I'm going to do, and then come back. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
I'll tell you my favorite and very secret way of working with mushrooms. I don't think I've told it to a lot of people, but
yes,
the best way to take mushrooms is in an ayahuasca ceremony. So I once felt calling to work with mushrooms, and we were during the ayahuasca retreat. So I spoke to my shaman if it would not be disrespectful, and he said no, it's totally okay. They're very similar energies. They're they come from the same family. It's if ayahuasca is abuela or abuelo, depending on tradition, the mushrooms are the grandchildren. So they're all together. And I would take mushrooms, and I would actually have my shaman bless it, do all the process as you would with ayahuasca, and then I would take them in an ayahuasca ceremony. And it's so amazing because what I noticed is when you do a mushroom ceremony with, let's say, 10 plus people, there's so much childish energy and so much joy. It inevitably goes to too much laughter, and it's like, but in an ayahuasca ceremony, everyone is kind of serious, and you're kind of joyful. And you get all this protection from the taita, and or taita is the way they call shamans here in Colombia. You have the fire, you have the incense, you have the medicine music, and you have the ceremonial setting, like we have in Maloca, like this beautiful medicine house, and it's just amazing. Unfortunately, here in Colombia, mushrooms are not really legal, so you can't really do mushroom ceremonies. But personal use is decriminalized, so whenever I feel like it. For me, I found that it's amazing. I would, for those of you who are listening who have their own ayahuasca retreat, I would recommend you try it. Just make sure the facilitators are informed in case if you're working with larger doses. But I like maybe 2 grams, like something very light, to process some emotions. My second favorite way would be to take maybe less than a gram and just be in nature, maybe. Lying on the grass and just crying it out and processing something smaller as well. I think that plant medicines, it's just such an amazing tool to have, like, to be able to have access to it, and more people need it in their life, I believe.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, I wrestled with this idea, and I know we talked about this very quickly before we hit record, but I wrestle with this idea because I understand logically that not every single person in the world would benefit from a psychedelic experience, right? Some people would be too much for things like that. But I also, at the same time, paradoxically believe that if every single person in the world took a dose of psilocybin or a dose of ayahuasca, even if it was like a in between a micro and macro, like a half gram of mushrooms, right? So we're not talking anything insane, right? But just enough to open the door. I wonder what would happen to the consciousness of planet Earth, you know? And again, like I understand Timothy Leary's type idea of dose the planet, you know? And for me, like I understand logically that's probably not the smartest idea, but there's also a big part of me that you know, wonders and also realizes that the position that the Earth is in right now, based on where we're at as a species, we don't really have a lot of time to get our shit together and stop arguing and bickering over dumb shit and getting divided and conquered by the powers that shouldn't be. And I really feel that in a perfect world, we'd be able to tell everyone to go meditate on a mountaintop for the next year and maybe they'd get some clarity. But we don't live in that kind of world, right? Most people are going from their job to their family. They're in poverty. They're doing whatever, right? And I think that if everyone were able to take some sort of dose of something, I just feel that, yeah, there'd probably be some challenges within that, right? But I wrestle with this idea, you know, of like, would it be good for humanity to all dose at the same time? Or is that, you know, maybe a, you know, an immaturity in me, right? Thinking that everyone or the world would have a better place if we did that. And that's why I know you're not a big fan of psychedelics, I mean, synthetics rather, but because a lot of people would have a challenge when it comes to a psychedelic experience, my theory is if everyone took MDMA at the same time, you know, like then even people that are not interested in psychedelics, they're going to be flooded with happy hormones, right? Happy chemicals, things like that. You know, albeit we need a lot of integration. There's a lot of things we'd have to think into it. But on a front-facing type value, I really feel overall, personally, and I don't know if it would play out this way, that the world would benefit if everyone took some type of psychedelic, you know? And I don't know what that is, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing for everyone, but I really feel that's where we're at. You know, I'm curious what your views are on that.
So number one, I'm not completely against synthetics. I just that's my personal approach. I prefer taking stuff that's been tried and tested for thousands of years or more, and it's just a safety measure. And I know there is a merit to them, and there's a lot of good ones like ketamine is saving a lot of lives, and MDMA. I would probably be open to trying LSD as well, as I told you, because there's this tradition. But on the one side, I really agree. I would like to wake up in a world where yesterday everyone had ayahuasca, because like it happens to me all the time, because obviously in this little microcosm of Lawayra, the ayahuasca retreat at which I live, I get to experience it every day. I wake up and then yesterday everyone had ayahuasca, and it's just awesome. Just, everyone is just so open and connected and vulnerable and loving. And it's just, of course, it's a natural for me to want the world to experience the same thing. But at the same time, I understand that if you give a strong psychedelic to everyone in the world at the same day, I think a society would collapse, because many people would not go to work next day. And I think it needs to be a gradual transition. I think that's the mistake Timothy Leary made. He went on it too hard and too fast, and obviously the world reacted, and it ended up not happening. So it'd be better if we really think about it. But regarding giving a lot of people psychedelics, I actually had this idea. Feel free to steal it as long as I get some kind of credit for it. I'm not a fan of VR technology, but I thought, what would happen if you build a software where people put their goggles on, and what they see is a ceremony. There's a bonfire, there's a shaman, and there's a group of 20 people that are all actually in their VR thingy doing their own things. But it's a ceremonial setting, and the shaman as well. So but instead of actually it being 20 people, you actually have 1,000 people in that group. And a very powerful shaman, because they can do a lot of their work remotely. But for each person in the group, they just see 20, like a conference style event. And then maybe everyone uses their own psychedelic, like their own mushrooms they grew, like a small amount. And then this way they can have that experience, even though they're in their bedroom. They can maybe have this experience of a ceremony and actual spiritual support. So that's a crazy idea I once had, But then it's something I've never confirmed. But like when you see visions, like open eye visions, would you still see them in VR or
Mm.
not? Because like is what you're seeing an enhanced reality, or is what you're seeing happening in your head? So that could also be scientifically interesting to figure out what is really happening. But if somebody who's listening knows VR technology, let's make it happen. I'm curious about those kinds of ideas. What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, dude, why I'm really excited about this idea that you just shared is that I went to a biohacking conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was like last minute. I was in Austin, hit up a buddy of mine. I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm in downtown, because when I go to Austin, I stay at my buddy Aaron's house. It's like 30 minutes from Austin proper. And so he's like, "Oh, I'm just finishing up at this biohacking event." And he's like, "Ben Greenfield's here, a couple other people." I was like, "All right, cool. Let me hop through." So I went down there, and they weren't checking tickets anymore. It was like 30 minutes till the event ended. It was a 3-day event. So I just walked right in and started hanging out with Josh Tran and Luke Story, who I just podcasted with a couple days before. So it was cool. I got to see a bunch of people I knew. And then my buddy Dave, he builds these fucking awesome sound beds, dude. Like, I mean, they're incredible. Shout out to Dave McCusker. But he actually gifted me one recently that's sitting in my kitchen. I'm about to open it and put it together. But anyway, he brought me over to this other booth with a different guy that builds these kind of like vibrating sound experience beds. But this guy, he had some light fixture, right? And I'm not like a super big biohacker, so I don't know really what it was. But I was completely sober, man, right? Not even caffeine in my system, nothing, right? And I lay down on this bed, and he tells me like, "Hey, keep your eyes closed the whole time." I'm like, "All right, whatever." So he puts this light thing in front of me, and when he turns it on, dude, the bed's vibrating, and these lights start going, dude. And literally, it was like I was tripping. Like, it was wild. And so what I, am curious about too is, in addition to your idea, is there a way to enhance VR so that you don't even need psychedelics to have some sort of psychedelic experience? Now, will it be the same as a psychedelic experience? Maybe not, right? Probably not. But for those people that maybe are terrified of a psychedelic, right? There's someone who maybe would not benefit from a psychedelic experience, right? Maybe they have a certain mental disorder that, aside from working with a shaman or whatever, they can't really figure out. So what would happen if we start putting certain binaural beats, certain solfeggio frequencies, putting, certain frequencies tuned to certain chakras in there, and start using some of those light things at the same time that mimic a lot of these closed eye visuals that you get in the psychedelic experience, and then add that into having them, be seeing them all around a fire with a shaman there, etc. And maybe some people can actually take psychedelics if they're relevant to that and they've discerned they're right for them. But I see VR, that being the strength of it, right? Because I'm with you. Like, I'm not a big fan of anything that takes us away from the experience of life we're living. But at the same time, right, like even like social media can be very toxic. Well, we also met through there, right? I've met a lot of people through there. So it's simply a tool, right? And so why I get really excited about this is I think Terrence Howard, I don't know if you've heard that Joe Rogan episode that Terrence Howard was on. If you haven't, check it out, dude. It's pretty wild. But he's actually the one that first formed the technology for virtual reality. And, he's a pretty big sendero. I don't know if he does psychedelics, but listening to that episode he did with Joe Rogan, I was like, I would be shocked if he has not messed with psychedelics. Just the things he's talking about. You'll get it. Anyone who's done psychedelics will understand, like, yeah, that's probably a psychedelic experience that started illuminating this stuff for him. But, all we got to do is get in contact with him and be like, "Hey, man, build us a house around this," right? Take your technology, make it psychedelic, and put it into the world. I think that would actually be a great way to have technology work for us, right? Rather than the other way. Because let's face it, right? No matter what we think about technology, it's not going to stop coming, right? It's going to be coming no matter what. So the best thing we can do is make it the most beneficial possible, and try to, along with all the things that are going to allow people to numb out, play video games, things like that. Let's start bringing some good stuff into here, like being able to have these experiences, being able to connect people around the world. I think that would be amazing, dude. So that's a great idea, bro.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people don't understand that psychedelics, or ayahuasca specifically, is also a biotechnology. Somebody literally figured out how to connect two plants that would never be connected otherwise to have this experience and to create this whole entire process of how to do it properly. Obviously, they had their tools and they had their pyramids and their understanding. That's what people talk about more and more now: frequencies, energies. I'm not a shaman. I don't know enough about that, but it is 100% a very precise and very complicated technology that combined with the plants provides this experience. I personally, I like progress. I think we could use different tools that we're coming up with and integrate them with the old tools, and not necessarily be like, well, this is the only way it should be done, and that's it. As long as we still have connection with tradition and don't completely lose it, because there is this there's so many things we don't know, as opposed to, let's say, shamans that have been drinking ayahuasca for 10 generations now. They might know stuff we don't know. So we need to somehow balance ourselves. This is what we try to do here at Lawayra, kind of balance the new modalities with the old modalities. But I can always go back to my shaman and be like, is it cool if we start ceremony a little bit earlier? Is it okay if we use this kind of mattress, or finding that balance? So I think that we could definitely use other technologies to enhance that experience even more and control it better. And maybe for those people that are completely afraid of losing their shit on psychedelics, maybe they can then be put in some kind of bed that calms them down and makes their experience better or more manageable. So that's what I think personally from ayahuasca perspective. I think we should still use the psychedelic, because it's not just in ayahuasca case, it's not just enhancing visions. It also creates a physical process, and the purging, that part that people really try to avoid and they don't like, the part where you puke and vomit. That's the part through which a lot of the physical healing comes through. So I would personally not want to remove it from the process. So, but you'd need a very complicated bed to facilitate that. But I think that the more people get into that space and the more people experience with it, and the more the technology progresses, hopefully we will come up with some unique and very interesting ways to do it. But what definitely doesn't get me excited is a clinical setting in work with psychedelics.
Yeah.
Like, or for some reason you need two therapists that are extremely expensive, and they need to sit there and just look at you, trip, and kind of make you feel uncomfortable in a way. I think that's not exciting for me. And also, we should not forget the spiritual side of things, and the shamanic origins of those medicines, because there is stuff that happens that we don't understand, that they do understand, and we need to ground ourselves in that tradition, both for better productivity of your process, and also for the safety of it, because there's definitely, the world is more complex than just this reality, and psychedelics open us up to those levels. But when you go there, it's not empty. There's other stuff there, and entities and spirits, and I'd rather have support of a shaman when I'm going through that. Or at least if you're doing psychedelics by yourself, light a fire, light a candle, have yourself some incense, maybe Palo Santo or Siete Esencias or rose water. Have somebody that sits there and holds space for you, set intention. You can. We're all a little bit of a shaman in ourselves, so we can use those powers, and as long as we're mindful of that, and we just don't make psychedelic experience this other Apple Store kind of
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, dude. It's funny you mentioned the Apple Store thing, because with cannabis, right? There was a great quote I heard, which was, when dispensaries start looking like an Apple Store, it's probably time to start freeing people from jail for having this plant on them. And I think we could extrapolate that into every plant, right? And, every one of these psychedelic medicines, because at the end of the day, I feel you, man. Like, I went to school to be a psychologist. That was my plan in life for a little while. And for me, I understand that in one side, maybe there are some older people, especially here in America, that would only trust a clinical setting, right? So, okay, let's have it available, right? For those that really are just obsessed with the guy or girl in the white lab coat, right? That maybe would never be open to going to the jungle and, doing it in that kind of setting. But at the same time, those of us that have connected with any amount of psychedelics realize why a clinical setting is like a big yikes, right? Because having fluorescent lighting on you, having very studious people around you, that's the shit that makes you skeeve out, Like, for me, when I do psychedelics, I want to be on the earth, like you were talking about, like laying in the grass, walking in the woods, or if I'm going to do it inside, to be on my personal bed, right, with Rachel, my partner, And that's really it. Like, I really think that there's a reason why when you look at any indigenous or shamanic society, they have not decided to start doing psychedelics inside buildings, right? And, again, by buildings, I mean like clinical settings and things like that. Obviously, you guys do things in malokas and things of that nature, but, even the geometry of a maloka versus a rectangular square building is totally different. And biogeometry dives into this, that, when Native Americans started getting put on reservations here in America, they were immediately saying, hey, these buildings are getting us sick, right? Because in nature, there are no straight lines. It was funny during Terrence Howard's episode, he mentioned that, right? He was like, yeah, there's no straight lines in nature. And people were roasting him, being like, what is this guy talking about? There's no straight lines. Meanwhile, they are not aware that this is one of the first teachings you learn in biogeometry. So that was what was funny about that episode, is that when you hit a podcast like Rogan and you start talking about things of that nature, most people are not going to get it because they're not in that level of consciousness, right? But for me personally, and I'm not saying that I'm holier than thou or I'm in some level of consciousness, but I've been studying this stuff for a long time in biogeometry. So to me, I was like, oh, wow, that actually showed me right away, like, this guy knows what he's talking about, And again, I'm not smart enough to fact check everything he talked about in that episode by a long shot. I mean, he was talking about some really out there stuff. But, that was one of the things that immediately caught my eye. I'm like, ooh, this guy's speaking the truth, because there's a reason why when you go to an ayahuasca center like yours, or even my buddy Jason Bacard, who's worked with a lot of medicine and a lot of different shamans and has a house up here in upstate New York, anyone who knows better will always do a psychedelic in a circular type building or with biogeometry in a typical, rectangular house or whatever, something that will allow those straight lines and the impediments on the energy that they cause to be mitigated, So it's really cool that you're speaking about these things, because I do feel like in the modern day world, and this is kind of the story of Atlantis, right? Atlantis became so technologically advanced, but they didn't have any foundation. So because they didn't have the foundation, they started using all their technology for warfare and they blew themselves up. And so in the way of psychedelics, right, now they're being put into a clinical setting of like, oh, well, you can only work with someone who's gone to school for 8 years to be a psychedelic therapist. And it's like, I'm not downplaying the education aspect of it, but why would they not want to go down to Colombia or Peru and train with a shaman for 8 to 10 years? Like that to me I would much rather sit with someone who spent time training with a shaman than someone who's been training at Stanford, or MIT or Harvard or any of those schools personally, So I'm really glad you brought that up too.
It's kind of like, would you rather go to war and have in your platoon somebody who's been a veteran and fought in the war for 8 years, or somebody who went to military school for 8 years? Like, who's going to be more useful in the battle? But speaking of time frame, whichever path you take, or hopefully the combination of both to increase to make it even better, increase the efficiency of it, is time matters. Like there's too many people now that confuse, as I like to say, confuse the invitation to study in a university with a diploma, and they have the calling to become a shaman, and then next day they call themselves a shaman.
Yeah.
That's another kind of extreme side of this. But as long as you take your time and you really learn from as many sources as you can, and you take it seriously with respect and reverence, I think that's a good path to take. And yeah, it's exciting times we live in. Like you have choice now to go to, you can go to medical school and then go work with shamans. Like for example, my chief facilitator, Mark, he's actually going to join medical school like 4 or 5 months from now, and he probably is going to end up taking this psychology directions. But now he already worked with hundreds and hundreds of people going through their processes, and knows his psyche much better than most existing psychologists do. So it's great to have this living, breathing plant medicine traditions from which we can learn, because they've been seeing visions and understanding them and navigating those worlds for thousands of years now.
Yeah, 100%, man. Could not have said it better myself. And, one of the questions I have for you, because typically when you hear about ayahuasca, it's Peru, 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 right? And I know you're in Colombia. I have a good buddy who's been on the show way back in the beginning named Danny Rios, who was very big on Colombia for ayahuasca, or rather Yage, right? And I think a lot of people get confused between ayahuasca, Yage, etc. And I'm curious to ask you, man, like, why are you so, to use a crypto term, why are you so bullish on Colombia? And what would you say the difference is in your experience between ayahuasca and Yage? Is it just the name? Is it how it's prepared? Is it how the ceremony's led? I get this question a lot, so I'd love to spill the beans on this.
Mhm. So some of the original people that studied ayahuasca, and if I'm not mistaken, in the Wade Davis podcast, who's also really bullish on Colombia, he was talking that Eric Schultes, if I'm not mistaken, he was coming to Colombian Amazon when he was discovering ayahuasca originally. So I'm not completely sure about that. I need to confirm that story because it's from a third party, but I'm so bullish on ayahuasca in Colombia that our original website still is ayahuascaincolombia.com. This is how bullish I am. When I learned, I was already in Colombia and I was already curious about ayahuasca. When I learned that it was available here, after more than 3 years of living here, it was really surprising for me. And I was like, the world deserves to know that there is ayahuasca here, and it is as traditional, if not even more traditional, than in Peru. So obviously, this is one of my big goals to promote it and to let the world know. The reason ayahuasca got popularized in Peru and not in Colombia is narcos. In the 80s, 90s, when it was starting to get popular, Colombia was not a place you'd want to go to, but this has changed. It's now arguably safer than some other counterparts. I think because there was not this big influx of psychedelic tourism, it did not lose its connection to tradition. It's a little more organized and a little less Wild West. Like there's no place in Colombia when you can go to the market and buy ayahuasca. They still only reserve that to shamans, and you need to have permits. And the ayahuasca growths were not overrun, so they're not depleted, and you have some of the older ayahuasca vines still. And I think that because of that, also it's a little more affordable compared to other countries. So, but what is the difference between ayahuasca and Yage? Like for example, this time my taita came and he says, this week we're gonna drink urihuasca. And then there's ambihuasca, and there's tigrehuasca and cielohuasca. There's people don't understand that there's many different types of vine and different types of the DMT shrub. So traditional Yage is the ayahuasca vine of whatever type, and chagropanga DMT shrub. And ayahuasca is ayahuasca vine and chacruna DMT shrub. But in general, it is the same thing. So it's ayahuasca provides the MAOI inhibitor, which makes DMT orally active, and then you have chacruna or chagropanga as the source of DMT. But I've never had Peruvian ayahuasca, only the Colombian one. But we had many people that came to Lawayra that have never have tried both, and they generally what they say. So it's confusing because some people say Colombian one is stronger, but it lasts a little less, and some say Colombian is Peruvian is stronger, but it lasts a little less. So it's like in reality, it's a very personal experience, and those are just two different types of ayahuasca. I like to say it's kind of like you can have Cabernet or Merlot. Both are red wines. Both will get you drunk. Only if you're an expert, you'll be able to tell the difference. But I think what matters more than the type of ayahuasca and type of the vine is the shaman, the preparation, the ceremonial part of it. So, for example, the gold standard would be if the shaman and his family themselves grow the ayahuasca, they themselves harvest it, themselves cook it. So it doesn't like change many hands, and everything is done with the ceremony. I think that is more important than the type of the vine or the type of the shrub they use.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that last part too, because I am very bullish on this idea that the energy of the grower who grew this medicine, whether it be cannabis, whether it be someone who maybe didn't grow the ayahuasca vine, but harvested it, worked with it themselves, that makes a big difference. And I actually talked with a guy named JR, who I'm getting on the podcast, I think tomorrow. And he's a cannabis farmer. He's been in a lineage of cannabis farmers for generations. He was raised in Northern California. And when the cannabis industry went boom here in America, right around 2012 when Colorado legalized, and then after that, a lot of places started legalizing, he found that Oklahoma was turning out the most poisonous cannabis of the entire country. They were very lenient on their laws down there, which, again, is not necessarily a good or bad thing, right? But it did allow a lot of people to get into the industry who maybe weren't aware of the sacredness of the cannabis plant. And it's funny because, a lot of times when I talk about this, because we live in a very left brain dominant world, especially here in America, I have people troll me all the time, like, oh, the energy of the grower who grew it. And it's funny because I really think that in the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be almost hilarious to talk about anything else than the energy of the grower who grew it, right? I think that looking at the microcosm that is cannabis, for instance, I think that in 5 to 10 years, people will be less likely to ask about how much THC it has, and they'll be more open to asking who grew it and what was their intention, right? Why do they have this business? Why did they choose to get into cannabis? And if we look at the whole world evolving in terms of level of consciousness, of course, this is coming back up, right? Of course, we're getting more imbued into the right brain state of being, where energy is something that even though we can't see with the naked eye, we understand exists. And the way that I always relate it to people is saying that we all understand what love is, right? We all have love for something or someone in our life, but we can't easily measure in units of love how much love we have for that person or that thing. But it doesn't mean that doesn't exist, right? We still know it exists. And so these qualitative aspects of life that cannot be seen with the normal, way of vision, right? Even science says we see 4% of what we know to exist in visible reality. And so I think that we're about probably 10 years ahead of the curve having conversations like this, and that's why they're so important to get out there, because it really does matter who you sit with. There are ayahuasca centers popping up all over the place here in America, and there's a lot of things that get challenged, right? Like there's a lot of people I know that have had very hellish experiences. And for me, the number one question I ask them is, well, did you ask them what their intentions were, right? Where they trained, why they chose to open this center? Because here in America, a lot of people do it because, oh, it's the next cash cow, right? They can make a lot of money doing it. And that is the last person I would want to sit in ceremony with. For me, I do believe 100% that people should be paid for what they do, right? They should have an equal energetic exchange. But there's a difference between someone getting into this industry because they think it's going to make them money and someone like you, right, with all the amazing people you work with, that is doing something really good for humanity and being able to receive compensation to keep your center going and to keep the medicine going out and to be really coming from a place of love, and I think these are really important things to talk about because most people just don't know this, they haven't thought of it. And with the renaissance of psychedelics exploding, these are the things that I really want more attention on and more education around, about like, what is your intention going in, and also what is the intention of the place you're going to? Why did they start, right? Where are they getting their medicine? How are they brewing it? What's their lineage, right? Are they part of a actual lineage, or are they just someone who's, went on Reddit and learned how to brew some random ayahuasca brew, and now they're a shaman because they went to Burning Man once, right? Like, and again, I choose to believe that people that do that have some sort of good intention, but they don't realize they're coming from a distortion. They don't yet understand the great responsibility that comes along with the great power these medicines have within them. And so I'm really glad we're talking about this because it's, in my opinion, the most important thing to talk about when entering the medicine space.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, and thank you for saying kind things about us specifically. I think a lot of people, I talk about it a lot at the retreat when people arrive, but I never even started an ayahuasca retreat. It was a desire to drink medicine from home with friends, and then it just kind of grew out. It's like first eight months of Lawayra's existence, we didn't make any money. We were lucky not to lose any money, right? So synchronicity started happening, and it just started growing and became what it is now, which is, I think we're one of the best rated ayahuasca retreats in South America, if not the world. I think right now we have 430, if not 440 5-star reviews on Google.
Wow.
And our average rating is 5 stars, which freaks people out. They're like, that's suspicious, like something's wrong. Like, you have to have 4.9, you cannot have 5 stars.
Yeah.
And then what else freaks them out is like on average an ayahuasca retreat, like 1 week, is about, it starts from $2,500 to let's say $3,500 for a week, and right now our price is $795, and that's also freaks people out. They're like, what? Why is it so cheap? And then they assume that it's actually worse. At the same time, we have people coming over that did retreats in places like Rhythmia, that is like $7,000 a week, and they have better experience here,
Yeah.
even though like it's cheaper. So it's confusing to people, but I think over time it will go from like why are you so cheap to like why are the other places so expensive.
Yeah.
But it is a business, and it is a business to run an ayahuasca retreat. It's a very difficult business because you're running a restaurant and a hotel and a madhouse sometimes at some points, like when it gets difficult.
Mm.
Like you have a musicians band, and you need to do all the marketing and all the content creation. I also have a podcast. It's a lot of things to juggle. So we absolutely need money, but I'm constantly fighting that price increase. So yeah, and it's a difficult business. So everyone who does it probably understands me, and I salute you for doing it. And you gotta charge what you gotta charge. Obviously, in some places things are more expensive, but as long as the intention is a good one, and you come, for example, for me, the medicine came first and the passion came first. The money came later. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say I don't like money. I'm hoping that one day when I finish building everything, because we keep reinvesting everything back, whenever we manage to make good money and build more cabins or build a nicer new medicine house, or my next step is going to be building a sauna, which I'm very excited about. But
Dude,
it's like
sick.
when the money comes, I would like to drive a nice car and
Yeah.
maybe go to an exotic trip because I deserve it. We literally, for a price of a hotel in a city, we change people's life forever, right? So healers deserve to have a good life, but it has to come later, right? Not like, oh, like look at this great business opportunity. Let me go make some money, because then it's just not going to work. And I think medicines and the spiritual side of things, it will kind of auto-regulate once again.
Mm.
Something like the destiny, the universe, whatever, will just shape it this way that the good places will become even better and the bad places will just cease to exist. At least I hope so. I have no idea, but I think everyone, whatever kind of work they do in the medicine and trying to like spread it and inform people, even if it's a different way from the way I do it, if they have good intentions, I wish them all the best. And I think that world needs more of it. And it would also be kind of not good if, let's say, there's 10 ayahuasca retreats in around Medellin where we are, and like we would all be like squabbling and like fighting, like I hate you because your ayahuasca is I don't know, darker or whatever, right? This kind of reminds me of religion. You have same Jesus and you have like 150,000 different religions based on that that hate each other, even though Jesus said like love each other. So I think we should try and find common grounds and be united front against too much antidepressants or aggression, negativity. Kind of, it's not easy. It's not
Mm.
easy. It's easier said than done because there are some things that some other places do that really trigger me.
Yeah.
But I need to like that's I'm telling this to myself right now. Is like choose love, and try to be together against this bigger, worse thing, and like don't allow them to divide and conquer us.
Yeah. 100%, man. Like I talk often about how thirst traps, right, which are commonly associated with very attractive people that have bad intentions, right? That's usually what a thirst trap is. But I extrapolate that to really talk about there being thirst traps everywhere. And one of them is that we should not like people that maybe are doing things differently than we're doing, exactly like you're talking about, right? And I know this firsthand because I'm in the coaching world, and it's same, very different, but same to what you're doing in the sense that some people are doing some very interesting things, let's just say. For me, having a background of 14 years in psychology and, about 5 years in coaching, et cetera, I know how much goes into this. I know like the power of bringing someone through a transformational experience. And I also know the intimacy associated with bringing someone through that type of experience. And, for me, I get very nervous when I see people that don't have any training going out there and doing these things. But within me, I'm also aware that, again, those people maybe imagine that they're doing something really good. And how do I know, right? Maybe they have some natural skill set. I don't know, right? And so for me, like, just like you, it's a practice in, choosing love in every moment of every day, because love is the only thing that really exists, right? It's the only objective reality we have, is to move farther and farther towards that destination of love. And anything that gets in the way of that, I consider a thirst trap, And so, dude, this has been amazing, Sam. Like, I can't believe an hour's already flown by, bro. I want to make sure I give you plenty of time to pitch where people can find you, where they can find out more about Lawayra, where they can find your podcast. And of course, we'll put it on the show notes, bro, but I'd love to hear right from your mouth.
So what I'd like to say, if you're curious about ayahuasca, but maybe you're not ready to drink it yet, and you're still doubting it, then the podcast would be the right place to go. Very easy to find, ayahuascapodcast.com. And from there, you can choose where you want to listen it. But I interview people with success stories. I also interview experts in the field. My last recent few episodes were I interviewed the UFC champion that turned an ayahuasca enthusiast, and now is like helping people treat traumatic brain injury with ayahuasca. Or I interviewed Ayla Schaffer, which is a famous medicine musician, about her inspirations. So there are some very interesting, fascinating episodes. PhDs, doctors, smart people. So that could be a good way for you to like learn and get ready for maybe eventually when you're ready to do ayahuasca. And if you are ready, you can go to lawayra.com, which is hard to kind of spell, but you can also go to ayahuascainColombia.com. There you'll find our website. Book a retreat, come over. As I said, we are affordable. The price might go up because, once again, I'm running out of money, but I'm trying to fight the price increase. So we are affordable, and just look at the reviews, both video reviews and Google reviews. People seem to really love what we do here, and it's coming from the heart. Definitely, I am very passionate about ayahuasca, and Colombia deserves to have more tourism because it's such a beautiful place. Narcos is a thing of the past, so it's actually much safer than most cities in the U.S. So come over, experience it here. And Ryan, you're also invited whenever you're ready.
Dude, I am so excited to have my first experience with you, man. I've shared in the show that I've yet to sit with Aya because I've just been waiting, right? Like, I felt the call for a while, but I didn't want to rush into it. I didn't want to have FOMO. I didn't want to just do it because everyone was doing it. I wanted to really wait. And that's been amazing because now I got to meet you. And I've never been to Colombia as well. And I have a good friend who's from Medellin, and she speaks very highly of it. I actually just met another woman as well who's from Colombia and was sharing a lot of the details with me. And it just sounds like an amazing place to go. And dude, I have one last question for you that I ask everyone who comes on the show. And that question is this, my man. Let's say someone listens to this episode and they get really excited to check out psychedelic medicines in their own life and maybe try them, right? What is the one piece of advice you would relay to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not medicines like ayahuasca are right for them in their life at this time?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very biased because I've never had anyone come to the retreat and regret drinking ayahuasca. I do have people that like come and they leave early and then they regret it. So I don't know if it's the most wise answer you have received, but if you're not very sick and like borderline dying, and if you don't have schizophrenia or the like history of schizophrenia in your family, just come and do it. If you feel called, try it. It's a very good medicine, and it's extremely safe, meaning that unless you like have those two things or take antidepressants, it's like in the indigenous culture, even children drink it, everyone drinks it, and they're totally sane and healthy and happy. So yeah, if you're those people, don't be afraid. Just give it a try. I think it will open a new world of possibilities for you. That's about ayahuasca specifically. I don't have an opinion about other stuff.
Yeah, dude, I love that, man. Very sound advice. And guys, I know you loved this episode. I'm not even going to say I hope you loved it. I know you loved it. Make sure you check out Lawayra. I've spoken with a lot of people that run different, retreat centers and things like that, and they're all amazing in their own way, but there really is something special about how Sam runs his center, the location it's in. It's absolutely beautiful. He was showing me it before we hit record. Absolutely incredible, beautiful mountain views, the entire thing. And like you guys heard today, his heart is in the right place, and that is the most important thing. If you guys loved the show, go give us a 5-star review. Helps us get the show out to more and more people, which we are super grateful for. And until next time, I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having the best day ever. And as always, may the source be with you. Peace.